All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating document, the 1941 Syllabus for the United Provinces Jail Training School in Lucknow. We usually think of historical prison guards in a, well, pretty one-dimensional way, right? Just guys with keys and batons. But the curriculum we're about to explore, it totally shatters that image. It actually demanded that its trainees be this wild mix of high-minded philosopher and gritty, heavy-lifting laborer. And stepping back into this era starts right here, with the weathered cover of the original 1941 training manual. It says, Courses of Study for Graduation Senior Training Course in Prison Administration and Correctional Work. Honestly, this single, unassuming little book was the absolute blueprint for creating the ultimate prison administrator in pre-independence India. So, here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with a look inside the 1941 syllabus, then move into theories of crime and punishment, followed by the psychology of offenders, prison industry and administration, and wrap up with agriculture and architecture. Kicking things off with Section 1, inside the 1941 syllabus, and this whole idea of a dual nature training. Now, take a look at this original table of contents. It is just a staggering mix of subjects. It jumps abruptly and literally on the exact same page from highly abstract theoretical concepts like training in sociability and criminology cum sociology, straight down into manual trades like dyeing, prison buildings, and even veterinary science. The sheer breadth of knowledge expected here is practically off the charts. They couldn't just be academics, but they couldn't just be taskmasters either. They really had to master the whole shebang. Let's move right into Section 2, Theories of Crime and Punishment, focusing on the mind of the offender. Right in the opening pages, Lecturer B. Arkalia drops this definition of penology. He calls it a field of profound and scientific inquiry, dealing with treatment and aftercare. And he specifically notes this was a concept that really hadn't attracted much attention in India yet. So right out of the gate, it frames the warden's job not just as, locking people up and throwing away the key. No, they were supposed to act as active scientists of human behavior, tackling the super complex problem of post-release integration. The syllabus then lays out this timeline, looking at the evolution of punishment chronologically. It moves from retribution to deterrence and ultimately lands on the progressive goal of reformation. The curriculum was very deliberate here. It wanted these trainees to know, without a doubt, that the modern penal system belonged squarely in Era 3. The focus was totally meant to be on rehabilitating the individual, rather than just the state extracting some kind of blind revenge. And to actually achieve that reformation, they were teaching these trainees some pretty advanced sociological concepts. For instance, they were explicitly warned about, quote, the menace of heterogeneous imprisonment in destroying morale. Basically, the syllabus drilled into them that carelessly throwing a novice, first-time offender into the same block as a hardened habitual criminal would just absolutely destroy any chance that new inmate had at reform. Getting that sociological nuance right was considered absolutely crucial for classifying and separating the prison population properly. All right, Section 3, the psychology of offenders, or as we often frame it, nature versus nurture. Here, trainees actually had to weigh biological heredity against environmental factors to figure out the root causes of criminal behavior. On the biological side, they were studying chromosomes and genes. But then on the environmental side, they had to analyze the impact of grinding poverty, harsh economic contrasts, and incredibly strenuous living conditions. The kind of things that might drive someone to commit a crime simply out of a desperate need to escape their reality. It gets even deeper because administrators were required to understand psychoanalytic motives for crime. Just look at this incredibly dense list they had to master: organic needs, the escape motive, fear and anger, social motives, self-assertion, and deep-seated repressions. It's wild to think about, but they were quite literally being trained as amateur psychoanalysts to fundamentally understand the motivations of the people they were managing. Let's transition into Section 4, Prison Industry and Administration. Time to hit the factory floor. Now, the sheer administrative burden placed on a warden was staggering. They had to keep strictly accurate, incredibly mundane records for basically everything. So while a warden might be pondering the psychological repressions of an inmate one minute, the next minute they had to pivot and maintain exact stock books for the factory, schedule the labor, and meticulously track the purchase of dietary grain down to the very last ounce. Talk about wearing multiple hats. And the training went into extreme granularity. Wardens literally had to memorize the exact step-by-step process for industrial weaving, from warping to sizing and brushing, all the way to drafting on the loom. They left absolutely no stone unturned. The idea was, if an inmate made a mistake on the loom, the warden was expected to know exactly how to step in and fix it. Plus, to keep these prison industries running, administrators were overwhelmed with highly technical details. They had to memorize the specific applications of various chemical dyes. The curriculum lists sulfur dyes, acid dyes for wool, indigo, and kutch across totally different textiles like cotton and hemp. So, scratch just managing people, they were expected to be master tradesmen overseeing complex chemical processes. Okay, wrapping up with Section 5, Agriculture and Architecture. This is about literally grounding the prison. Check out this staggeringly specific list of local building materials a warden had to be familiar with. The syllabus lists everything from your basic sand and cement to highly specialized materials like Cirque and Conquer lime. I mean, they actually had to know the structural differences between lime mortar and mud mortar for brickwork. And why did they need all this hyper-specific construction knowledge? Well, because these future wardens weren't just desk jockeys. They were taught to act as hands-on construction overseers for the whole facility. We're talking official bungalows, flush latrines, soak pits, all the way up to the massive main wall of the prison itself. They were basically the general contractors for the entire penal colony. Oh, and on top of all of that, the syllabus demanded they master agricultural duties too. So the exact same scholars who were studying the subconscious motivations for crime in the morning had to know the proper classification of soils, the timing for hot weather cultivation, and the highly practical, messy business of preparing compost manure in the afternoon. This original page covering animal hygiene really just perfectly captures the total duality of this curriculum. It shows that these high-minded sociological scholars also had to serve as amateur veterinarians. They had to know how to treat cattle diseases like rinderpest and anthrax, and yes, even perform practical castrations on livestock. Honestly, the mental whiplash required to jump from criminology to veterinary science in a single day is just astonishing. So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought for today's explainer. Does understanding the evolution of the vertebrate brain actually make you any better at mixing lime concrete? Or were the expectations placed on these 1941 administrators just completely undeniably impossible? It's an incredible window into an era that demanded its public servants be absolute polymaths of both the mind and the mud. Just think about what we expect from our leaders today in comparison. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep your curiosity sharp.